Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee, Admin Evangelist, and this is How I Solved It. Are you a company that tracks activities above and beyond emails, tasks, and calls? Dee Ervin created a solution that provides a comprehensive view of activities using Flow. Check it out in this episode of How I Solved It. Today, I'm joined by Dee Ervin. She is an awesome admin. Welcome to How I Solved It.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me.
So I know your first interaction with Salesforce is over 10 years ago, and this was first as a user. Can you share with us your Salesforce journey?
Sure. So when I first heard about Salesforce, of course, our sales team was using it. I just looked at it like, okay, I have no idea about it. I'm not getting into tech anyway. It doesn't really matter. But then as time went on, we had a great innovator in our company who decided, let's expand the use of Salesforce to other departments. At the time, I was in the contracts department. We were building out a custom quote engine, and I was the subject matter expert. So I became the business analyst on that project. And then from there, my knowledge just expanded because I absolutely love Salesforce. I love puzzles and problem solving, and Salesforce gave me the vehicle to do that.
Great. So you recently presented at Dreamforce for the admin track. What did you present about, and why did you want to present?
Sure. So I presented on user adoption. I presented about this before, and the reason why is because I'm constantly building out things in Salesforce, and definitely as a solo admin, which is the focus of my talk, I felt like you have to have a strategy when you're dealing with so many people and it's just one of you. And so that is really what my talk focused on. It was user adoption for solo admins. And it's just the strategies I learned along the way as I started interacting with my users, understanding how they learn, and then also just understanding what was the best way to present materials.
So you started your own consultancy, She's in Tech, which is a pretty cool name. What was your motivation to start your own business?
Yeah, so I started She's in Tech after a long tenancy at a company, and I decided to do that because I saw a lot of individuals were taking that leap and going toward the path of independent contractor. I felt like it would give me more exposure to different businesses, really expand my knowledge of Salesforce. And so that was my initial motivation for starting the consultancy. And now, it's just one of those things where I have my 9 to 5, which I enjoy the work that I do, but then I also have a way to continue learning with other business scenarios.
That's great. So share with us the business problem you're trying to solve regarding activity tracking.
Yeah, so I had a business problem that was more around reporting. And the issue was that the managers could not get a comprehensive view of what all of the support representatives were working on between case statuses. So though they had a log for call, they had a log for email and that sort of thing, there was still time between changing from one status to the next that were activities that were more internal or research or that sort of thing. And they did not have a way to fully understand how much time was spent between statuses. But that was one business problem. The second one was they wanted a report that included all of the details, both the emails and calls, along with this case status tracking. And that is how I came up with my solution.
Great. So why don't you show us how you went about giving that comprehensive view of activities?
Sure. Okay, so right now I'm on a case. And in order to demo how this process works, what I'm going to do is clone this case and show you what happens when a new case is open. So the first status in this case model is new. So if I were to clone this and save it, the first open activity is a status activity, and it is set to new. There is also values within this task called case type. The values contained in here will advise whether it is a new or reopened case. And then there is also a field called case status. This mimics what is on the case itself. One thing about this design is it will scale. So let's say if someone were to add additional statuses to the case, they would not have to then update the task case status field. I have set it up, and I'll get to the field shortly, to where it will accept new values. It is not restricted to the pick list that is there. So if you wanted to migrate this solution over to other case types and that sort of thing, there's not a problem because the statuses will stay aligned. So first, let me show you what it looks like if I were to move from new to working. And I'm working this case. The new status activity has moved to the history. It has been completed. I have a duration on there. I have my duration set to hours, but you can set it to minutes or days, whatever works for your business model. And now I have an open status activity for working. And as I keep moving through the statuses, you'll see the same thing will happen. The last one will close and a new one will open based on the status of that case. Now, the final thing is, let's say I were to close this case. So if I close it, all it's going to do is close the last status activity and then hold there, because we do not need a new activity for the fact that it's closed. But let's say this client was to email in and that triggered a reopening of the case. So if that was the case, let's say I go to new because they have reopened the case. Now, instead of the case type being new, it's reopened. So now you have two sets of tracking, one for as the status has progressed when the case was new, and then as the status has progressed when the case was reopened. And it goes through the same process. So let's say when it was reopened, I had to put it on hold. That will also stay as reopened, and it will follow the same model. What this will then do is allow for reporting. So let me show you what that looks like. This is a report that you could yield from this model. You would have the case type of new or reopen, then have a breakdown of the statuses that are in line with the progression of the case management. You'll also be able to understand what was the duration of time that a case stayed in that particular status when it was new and when it was reopened. You can definitely play with these fields and add things that fit your business model, but the overall goal is to just understand how long one is spending within a particular status. So let me show you how this is built out. So in order to achieve the report previously shown, the first thing you'll need to do is create 3 fields. The first field is case type. This is denoting whether or not the case is new or if it's reopened. This will allow for that designation within the reports to understand how long a case stayed in particular statuses, when it was new and when it was reopened. The next field is case status. As previously mentioned, this is the status that is on the case at the time that the task is created. I have deselected the restrict pick list to the values defined in the value set because I want the fact that the case may change over time as to how the support process is managed, to allow for that data to feed into this field and for the admin to not have to manage both the case status on the task and the case status on case. The last field is status duration. So as I mentioned, this is currently in hours for this org, but you can always calculate just minutes or even days. So again, that depends on your business model, but you do need some type of duration to add to the report. So once these fields are created, the next thing to do is to create a flow. So I created a record triggered flow for this. And the start criteria is very simple. It's whether a case is created or updated and what's the current status. So this first condition is really for that new case creation and just making sure that that initial task is created. Next is each time that it changes. And you want to make sure that this runs after the record is saved, not before. The next piece to this is to obtain whether or not there is already a status activity task on the record. In order to do this, I had to create a unique identifier for the tasks that are created from this flow. And that unique identifier is contained within this formula. So I'm going to actually go over to the formula for this. And this is simply a text formula with a default value of status activities, because part of the naming convention for these tasks that are created is status activities is the suffix for all of them. So there's also a formula within this flow to establish that naming convention, which consists of case status, underscore, and then status activities. So whenever I need to get the status activity task only, this is a very easy way to find those tasks. So in the case of this get element, all I want is the task related to this case and also contains that subject line filter. It's important to only grab the first and most recent record. So in order to do that, I've set it up so that it only grabs the first record and it is sorted descending, which means the most recent is first, and by created date, and I can store all fields. That's not a problem. The next thing is with the get element, sometimes a task is not found, and that actually fits the model of this design. So in that case, I have created a fault connector in order to handle when nothing is found in this get status activity task. This actually connects to the decision, because within these decision outcomes are a couple of paths that will take care of the fact that no status activity task was found. So if I move through and I go to this decision, there are 5 potential scenarios. And I broke this up in this way. And in all honesty, this could have been combined in some way, but I felt like having it divided already allows some flexibility if the business process changes, or if I'm given more details from leadership on how they would want this to work. The paths are already created. I don't have to separate it later. So we have 5 different scenarios. One is we have an open status an activity, which means that it has not been completed, and an open case, which has not been completed, and so forth. So I have named these accordingly, and feel free to check out the blog to understand what each of these connect to, and what are the criteria within each of these outcomes. But one thing I do want to mention is it is very important that these are in a particular order, because the order of priority is that I want there to be a closing of the open task, then to check again to see if a new task should be created. So because of that, what I've done is I have added the open status activity open case as the very first path. And that will lead to closing the activity. Then I needed to go back and go through the process again. So this is kind of a loop without a loop to go through the process again, and then determine what should be done next, which will be one of these other paths. And the other piece of this is that when we go through the actions, as you can see, there's only 3 actions, but there's 5 paths. So what helped in this flow is the fact that I could connect the elements. So I didn't really need to create new update elements or create elements for each of these, because they actually could just be connected to the actions that existed. So as I mentioned, first there's the close. Then if there's a completely new case, I need to create a task activity. So that connector points here. So if I open this up, this is just simply bringing over all the details for the task creation. And this is where that status activity subject line is being created. And also the case type is being determined. So let me go into the formulas for those so you can see what those look like. So let's start with the subject line. So as mentioned previously, the subject is the case status underscore and then status activities. And again, status activities is that unique identifier within the subject line. So this is a formula just to concatenate those elements. The next formula is an if statement. So this create status task will allow for creating tasks that are both reopen or new based on these details here. So the the case type reopen would be assigned if it is the fact that the case is reopened, or it would be assigned as new. So this logic will take care of that piece. Okay, and then the last one here is really, this one is only here when the case is initially reopened. So when I was testing this, I noticed that there was a small gap in if there is a case that has already existed and you need to go in and it's reopened after this model has been introduced or implemented, then you need a way for it to pick up those records. And this one create element will take care of that particular scenario. And this is how I solved it.
All right, so I love your loop without a loop concept. You mentioned in the very beginning that it was important to set it to after save. Can you explain to our audience what's the difference between a before save and after save and why that's important?
Sure. So the before save allows you to make the change to the record before it's actually committed to the database. So all of these actions will take place before you actually see the record update on the page. Whereas an after save will allow for other automation to run, save that record to the database, you see the change, and then it will run right directly after that. The reason why it's important is because the case statuses need to be set prior to the actual task being created. If it happens beforehand, we will get the previous value for that case status versus the current value of the case status after the change.
Great. Thanks for that explanation.
No problem.
Thank you, Dee, for showing us your solution to close the gap in activity tracking to get that comprehensive view of activities with Flow.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
You just saw how Dee showcased her automation skills by building a flow that gives her company a comprehensive view of all activities beyond the traditional activities in Salesforce. Way to go, Dee. You can always find videos like this at admin.salesforce.com and also by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Salesforce Admins, so you will never miss another episode of How I Solved It. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome admin.